Okay, so it's time for us to go ahead and get back into our coverage over X-Force. As a matter of fact, it has been a while since we last sat down and talked about this group when it comes to our coverage over the X-Men. Now, we're going to pick up with X-Force issue number 59, 60, and 61. And this is a three-part storyline that's really kind of diving into what could be part of the origin of Shatterstar. It's not could be because technically it is part of his origin, but when it came to Marvel Comics, down the road, you had later books really did build on the actual origin of the character. But for Shatterstar, we kind of pick up with him right now being interrogated by X-Force. For Siren and also Shatterstar, they were basically confronted by a character known as Game Master in an earlier storyline we did for our coverage over the X-Men. Now, when it came to Game Master, what he did was he had revealed this name to Shatterstar, Benjamin Russell, but made it seem like for Shatterstar that was his real name and the possibility that he had a past life with that name being used. And so the question is now, where in the world did that name come from? Like, did Shatterstar possibly live a life in the past better known as Benjamin? Now, let's not forget, when it comes to Shatterstar, he is from the future, but from a future of a different dimension, better known as Mojoverse. And so when it comes to this three-part story arc, it's really trying to dive into the whole idea of Benjamin Russell. But this is also leading into the return of, well, Richter. Now remember, Richter was part of the New Mutants, but also he was part of X-Force for a very long period of time. But you did have Richter step away, but he always did promise that he would come back for his friends, especially when it comes to Shatterstar. Now, for Cable, what he is trying to do with Shatterstar here is trying to prevent another Charles Xavier. You see, this is just right after the whole idea of X-Men Onslaught. The idea that you had Charles Xavier turn into Onslaught and wreck New York. And with this still being around that time, that also means like the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, they're no longer around at this time. And so for Cable, with him with him believing in Charles Xavier so much, he hated the idea that he got Charles wrong. And so he wants to make sure that Shatterstar would not have the potential of becoming the next Onslaught that has to be stopped. Now, we do kind of switch over to Warpath and also Siren, and this is really more the idea that for Siren, she hates the idea of Warpath moving on. Let me explain. You see, in the earlier parts of our coverage over X-Force, when it came to Warpath, he did try his best to express his love to Siren. The problem was Siren did not return that love back to Warpath. Now, for Warpath, he did, continue on, and he found somebody else, better known as Risque. Now, when it came to Risque, she did disappear right after helping out X-Force, I want to say in the middle of the Onslaught crossover. But for Warpath, he has been trying his best to find her. But for Siren, she hates the idea of Warpath moving on, but also showing so much concern for a woman that he barely even knows. Now we do shift over to a character known as Charlotte Jones. Now Charlotte Jones is a detective, but the reason why we bring her up right now because, well, she does have some connections with the X-Men because of Archangel. But when it comes to Charlotte Jones in this storyline, for Charlotte, you had Cable ask her to look up information about Benjamin Russell. The problem is that that file has gone missing. And matter of fact, every single file she had on X-Force when they got arrested in an earlier storyline has also gone missing as well. And so when she does run into Cable, she does inform Cable like, hey, listen, everything we had on Benjamin Russell, but also on X-Force as well, had just disappeared. Now for Cable, that's kind of concerning because how in the world did the police department just misplace or possibly remove a whole chunk of files based on X-Force? But you do have X-Force head over to the Wisemen Institute. And the reason why, because in the earlier storyline for Siren and also Deadpool, they were kind of locked away inside this institute that was being controlled by Game Master. Now, when it came to Shatterstar, it was here that he had discovered the name Benjamin Russell. But when you do have our heroes begin to walk around the place now looks like it's been abandoned. But the thing is, that can't be right, because for X-Force, really more Siren and also Deadpool and Shatterstar, they were there just a few weeks ago. So how in the world, in a few weeks, this entire place has changed over to looking like it's been abandoned for years? Now, for our heroes, they tried their best to find some type of clue that could possibly help them figure out what exactly is going on with the whole Benjamin Russell storyline, but they couldn't find anything. And so you have our heroes begin to head over to Boston. The problem is that while trying to fly away, you didn't have our heroes be confronted by Magog and Gog. Now, these two characters, they're also from the Mojoverse, but you do have these two characters, plus also Richter and his powers, do some serious damage to the aircraft that X-Force is currently using. And so with that damage being done, you then have the two creatures grab Shatterstar and begin to teleport away. Now, for Cable, he knows if they do teleport away, there's a possibility they might lose Shatterstar for good. And so you have Cable go ahead and teleport with them back to the Mojoverse. Now, once you do have our heroes figure out how to, land the aircraft safely, you didn't have our heroes be confronted by Longshot. Now, we have not seen Longshot in a very long time, but the last time we saw Longshot, him and Dazzler, they were over in the Mojoverse, trying their best to, free the Mojoverse from the control of Mojo. But apparently for Longshot, he's here to help out X-Force to, bring Shatterstar and Cable back home. And so as we dive into issue number 60, we do pick up with Cable and also Shatterstar currently and now prisoners of Mojo, where you now have Magog and Gog trying their best to mind wipe our heroes so that they can then be manipulated and controlled by Mojo. Now, just in case we do have anybody just joining our coverage over the X-Men and may not know who Mojo is, you see, for Mojo, he is part of a race of spineless beings from a planet later named after him, known as Mojoworld, in a pocket dimension dubbed the Mojoverse. The race were slowly driven insane by waves of energy, TV signals from the main Marvel universe, somehow scattered throughout the timeline, really their timeline. Either way, they were bombarded with these strange demon-like creatures, of course, images from the TV signals they were picking up. Now, over the years, you did have Mojo being able to kind of come out the actual ruler of this planet, but because his race was driven insane by TV signals from the main Marvel universe, for Mojo, he's really big on TV. And so over the years, he will always try to kidnap different heroes and bring them over to Mojoverse to kind of use them for his TV programs to show his entire people what kind of shows he's cooking up. Now, getting back over to the rest of X-Force, you do have them head over to the home of Doctor Strange. And the reason why, because for Longshot, apparently he has been using Doctor Strange as a way to get to and from the Mojoverse. But when it comes to Doctor Strange around his time in Marvel Comics, he was powerless. And so with him being powerless, he's not really able to help X-Force to get over to Mojoworld. Now we do switch over to Risque. Now when it comes to Risque, she was with X-Force in the middle of the Onslaught crossover. The thing was, she was saved the very last second by some unknown people, but we couldn't find out who had saved her. You see, it was actually Blob and also Mimic. Now, these two characters, they're working with somebody else, but they're really upset about the idea that after they gone out of their way to save her, that she tried to sneak away. And so they found her and, of course, recaptured her all over again. Now, if we do switch over to Shatterstar and also Cable, who are technically still prisoners of Mojo, you have Mojo right now forcing them to watch videos that took place 100 years in the future, where Shatterstar is from, where they're right now watching videos of Shatterstar killing off Mojo. Here's the problem though. You see, for Shatterstar, right now, he's very confused with the idea that he's beginning to believe that he is Benjamin Russell. Now, you do have Cable try to break free, take down Mojo, and save Shatterstar, but he's then confronted by Spiral. Now, for Spiral, she does play a major role in the storyline, but I'm going to save why for the last chapter of the storyline. Now, for the rest of X-Force, they do arrive in Mojoworld. Now, when they do arrive in Mojoworld, they're then confronted by Dazzler. Now, with Dazzler being there, we get reminded that her and Longshot have been working together to fight against the forces of Mojo. Now, it's also Dazzler kind of warning our heroes that Mojo is no longer the man he used to be, meaning that for Mojo, he's no longer just focusing on the idea of televised battles. He's now loving the idea of really war. And so for Dazzler, she believes that this begins the 100-year war. And so you do have our heroes kind of work their way into the palace of Mojo. Now, their main goal is to find Mojo. The problem is Mojo is, well, not there. Matter of fact, for our heroes, what they find left behind is a TV. Now, for Domino, she does turn on the TV, except when she does, she comes to find out that for Cable and also Shatterstar, that they're currently inside Mojo's televised product, and technically with them being in that form right there, most likely they won't be able to survive. Now, as we get into the final chapter, we're also seeing that when it comes to the people in Vermont, or possibly a lot of folks across the nation, they're kind of being forced to watch the Cable and Shatterstar TV show. And so we see our two heroes right now just in another program being controlled by Mojo. And while being in this other program, we do see our two heroes trying to work together to survive. But at the same time, for Shatterstar, he does make a huge mistake here. You see, for Shatterstar, he does see Mojo in the distance. And so for him, his main goal is to go ahead and try to kill off, Mojo. The problem is that this whole entire program is being controlled by Mojo. So at first, it does look like we're gonna see Shatterstar possibly kill Mojo, but that's not the real one. It's a fake one in this digital world. And so unfortunately, you have Shatterstar get stabbed. We also learn that when it comes to Mojo, he's not really in the Mojoverse at the moment. You see, he's actually in Vermont, controlling the program from there. But of course, it's also Mojo enjoying the fact of watching Shatterstar possibly die. Now, this kind of leads into our heroes beginning to work together to figure out, how can they save Cable and also Shatterstar? So, with our heroes still at the palace that belongs to Mojo, you did have our heroes be confronted by Spiral. Now, for Spiral, she does work for Mojo, but at the same time, she's also a time traveler who wants to help out the X-Force team to save their teammates. Now, when it comes to the whole idea of Shatterstar, Spiral, and Longshot, even Dazzler, there's so much time traveling going on, we might need a video to fully explain the whole idea of those characters, including Mojo as well and his role in all those characters' lives. But either way, for Spiral, she does inform X-Force that she does have a way to save Shatterstar and Cable, but she needs the help of Longshot and also Siren. And so you do have those three characters go into that digital world that you had Mojo built. Now, for Mojo, he does find out that Spiral had technically switched sides. And so, of course, he does get very upset, but he also does lose the signal of the show. So, unfortunately, he can't watch at the moment. But getting back over to the Spiral storyline, you have Spiral take Cable, Siren, Longshot, and Shatterstar back over to the Wisemen Institute. Now, here's the reason why, because inside that place, there was a patient who unfortunately went into a coma right after his mutant powers had manifested, and that would be Benjamin Russell. And so what Spiral's trying to do right now is have Siren lead everyone over to the room where Benjamin is at. Once she does that, you then have Longshot transfer the soul of Shatterstar out of his dead body into the body of Benjamin Russell. That is why when it comes to Shatterstar, it's the whole idea of why he is known as Benjamin Russell, because his soul was put in the body of a man who was in a coma. Now, when it came to Marvel Comics, they did not fully explain the whole idea of Benjamin, but also the idea of why Shatterstar had to be placed in the soul of this man right here. So unfortunately, if you're trying to look for more information for Marvel, they kind of forgot the storyline and moved on with their days. And that kind of leads into the ending of, well, this book, because for our heroes, when they do make it back to the palace, you didn't have Caliban go ahead and get rid of the TV that was being used to teleport our heroes into the TV program. Now, with the TV being destroyed, you also have Mojo being forced to teleport off Earth back to his dimension. And so the days seem to be saved, except for our heroes, they don't realize that once again, they're being watched by Game Master. But this is where we're going to end today's comic book video. So please leave me a like down below and subscribe. But guys, see y'all next time. Later.